Right now, Easter Triduum, 3 days, the summit of the liturgical year. We have exclusive coverage.
The Diocese of Brooklyn's Holy Thursday Mass is about to begin, but there will be no washing of the feet. It's about safety. I'm Emily Druby. That's ahead.
But the essence behind the Last Supper won't be lost, what the Mass is truly about. Then, churches and COVID. A new vaccine site opens up in a hard-hit neighborhood. Why the Queen's pastor says immigrants can trust his parish. But what about that factory mix-up? Millions of vaccines trashed. The FDA is investigating a Baltimore plant. And babies at the border dropped over the southern wall and left there. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Around the world tonight, 1 billion Catholics are commemorating Jesus' Last Supper, the final meal he shared with his disciples before his crucifixion. It's one of the most important Catholic liturgies of the year, and the Diocese of Brooklyn's Mass is about to begin. Currents News' Emily Druby is standing by in Prospect Heights at St. Joseph's Co-Cathedral. Emily.
Christine, for the first time in 2 years, we're seeing parishioners attend the Mass of the Lord's Supper in person. People tell me they're so happy to be back during Holy Week, but we are still in the middle of a pandemic, so safety restrictions are in place, things that you wouldn't normally see during this special Mass.
In the unity of the Holy Spirit.
No wine for parishioners, no washing of the feet, a crowd unable to process with the Blessed Sacrament. Big changes to one of the most important Catholic liturgies of the year.
We're trying to find every way that we can to eliminate any unnecessary contact.
But the essence of what the Mass of the Lord's Supper is truly about, not lost, celebrating the Eucharist and the priesthood.
Eucharist at its heart means thanksgiving. It really is a celebration for us about giving thanks to God for all the blessings that he has given to us throughout the year. And of course, we do this every day when we celebrate the Mass, but this is the day in which we celebrate the institution of that sacrament.
Priests will still receive communion, while parishioners will only receive the host. There will be no washing of the feet, following Jesus washing the feet of his 12 apostles at the Last Supper. It's an example of service, a pillar, Father Israel Perez says the church has still been upholding spiritually during this tough year.
The church, in different ways, are watching the feet of the world in this time, helping others in many countries, in many ways.
This spiritual connection gives hope. One Bishop DiMarzio says is extremely important right now.
We need an uplifting message, and there's nothing better than the resurrection, because it seemed like all was over. So we recognize that he rose from the dead. He gave new life and new hope to anyone who would follow him.
The bishop told Currents News he'll speak more about hope and keeping it strong in the face of the pandemic during his homily tonight. In Prospect Heights, Emily Druby, Currents News. Christine?
Yeah, Emily, why did they decide to do without the feet washing this year? And who usually gets their feet washed?
Yeah, Bishop DiMarzio told us it's to limit that face-to-face interaction. You have to be really close when you're washing somebody's feet. In the past, we've had a bunch of different people have their feet washed. Back in 2019, sex abuse survivors and members of the deaf community here in the Diocese of Brooklyn had the honor. Now, back last year, they symbolically washed the feet of first responders, including nurses and EMTs. Christine?
All right, Emily, thank you. We'll check back in with you right before the Mass. Coming up immediately following Currents News, Net TV's live coverage of Holy Week Masses continues. As Emily said, the Mass of the Lord's Supper will be airing at 7 p.m. On Good Friday, the Liturgy of the Lord's Passion will air at 3. On Holy Saturday, and Easter Vigil will air at 7, and for Easter Sunday, Net TV will air 5 Masses in different languages. The 8 a.m. in Italian, 9 a.m. in Creole, 11 a.m. in English, 1:30 p.m. in Spanish, and the 3 p.m. Mass in Polish. And as always, for more coverage of Holy Week events and to find services near you, head over to thetablet.org. The Diocese of Brooklyn is taking every measure to ensure that parishioners are safe, and that means some Triduum services will change. As Emily mentioned, there will be no washing of the feet during Holy Thursday services. All processions, including the procession to the altar for Holy Thursday and the Station of the Cross procession for Good Friday, are being discouraged by the diocese. The normal kissing of the cross on Good Friday by parishioners will not be allowed. And at the Easter Vigil, there will be no lighting of individual candles. New York's Cardinal Timothy Dolan spent Holy Thursday doing some Lenten almsgiving.
Hi everybody, Cardinal Timothy Dolan here on Holy Thursday. I'm taking a little break from working.
His Eminence blessing a new low-income housing building in the Bronx called Second Farms. Cardinal Dolan also took part in an on-site food distribution, helping to give out more than 2,200 meals. Monsignor Kevin Sullivan was also there lending a hand. He's the executive director of Catholic Charities for the Archdiocese of New York. He let us know who is going to move into the more than 300 new apartments.
Most of them, the overwhelming majority, are for hardworking New Yorkers who working in after-school programs, working in nursing homes, but people who are not making very, very high salaries. I met those families this morning. They're just so proud to be in their own apartment. But in addition to that, there's a small number, maybe about 35 apartments, that for some of the most really challenged of our neighbors who actually have had to reside for a while in the shelter.
Monsignor Sullivan went on to say those residents will have fully furnished apartments as well. A Catholic church in one of the neighborhoods hit hardest by the pandemic is now hosting a pop-up vaccination clinic. Starting today, Our Lady of Sorrows Church will be vaccinating more than 500 people. The New York City Health and Hospitals Test and Trace Corps is running the Corona Clinic, a neighborhood that's seen more than 10,000 COVID-19 cases and 500 deaths during the pandemic. Father Manuel de Jesus Rodriguez, the pastor of Our Lady of Sorrows, says the area's undocumented population trusts the church.
They know that the church means well to them, and because they know also that this is a real emergency situation. This is a life and death situation.
The pop-up clinic will be open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. tomorrow and throughout the rest of Holy Week and Easter Sunday. Starting April 19th, Our Lady of Sorrows will become a permanent site, functioning until no longer necessary. There's a special push to get Holocaust survivors in the city vaccinated. About 20,000 survivors live in New York City, 80% of them in Brooklyn. They're all over the age of 75 and have been eligible for the vaccine since January. But navigating the websites to get an appointment and actually getting to a vaccine site hasn't been easy. Jewish organizations are now helping them get the shot. But they may not be getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Shipments of the one-dose shot are being delayed. That's because there was a big mix-up at a Baltimore manufacturing plant and 15 million doses were contaminated. The FDA is now investigating. Amy Kawada is in Baltimore, and she says none of those doses ever left the plant.
A mistake at Emergent Biosolutions inside its East Baltimore plant. The New York Times reports the ingredients for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, as well as the AstraZeneca shot made here, somehow got mixed up, possibly ruining nearly 15 million doses.
We freeze them down and we ship them out of here to contract fillers who put them in the vials.
Governor Hogan toured this facility back in February and praised the work being done here. According to the Times, the issue has halted future shipments of the Johnson & Johnson shot, while the FDA investigates what happened. The mix-up is reportedly blamed on human error. In a statement, Johnson & Johnson says, in part, one batch of drug substance did not meet quality standards, adding none of the doses made in Baltimore have been used because the FDA has yet to approve the facility. Emergent says it's awaiting that approval, which the Times says is delayed because of the vaccine mix-up.
That was Amy Kawada reporting. Vice President Kamala Harris met with faith leaders in D.C. with hopes that this mix-up doesn't cause any more weariness among those hesitant to get the shot. Harris held a discussion yesterday with leaders from Catholic Charities, the Episcopal Church, and the National Association of Evangelicals on their efforts to encourage different communities to get the COVID-19 vaccine. The United States bishops have collectively been urging Catholics to get vaccinated, Pope Francis even calling it an ethical obligation. On top of the coronavirus crisis, there's an immigration crisis brewing at the southern border, and children are bearing the brunt of it. A U.S. Border Patrol camera caught a smuggler dropping 2 young children over a border fence in New Mexico. CBP released this video saying it shows the smuggler climbing up and over a 14-foot high wall with a small child. The person then dangles the child down over the ground on the U.S. side and drops them. The child hits the ground and is slow to get up. The smuggler does it again with a second child before jumping off the wall and running back into Mexico. According to CBP, a Border Patrol agent shot the video and alerted agents. They picked up a 3-year-old and 5-year-old. The U.S. is expected to encounter about 2 million migrants at the southern border by September 30th, a record high. Most of the migrants are single adults who will be turned away as soon as they're encountered, but many are children as young as those 2 toddlers. According to Customs and Border Protection, the last time border apprehensions surpassed 1 million was back in 2006. The situation has the U.S. bishops speaking out, saying in a statement released today, "We renew our appeal to our governments, to political leaders and civil society that they work together to welcome, protect, promote, and integrate migrants in accordance with their intrinsic dignity, as well as work with other countries in the region to eliminate conditions that compel their citizens to resort to dangerous and irregular migration, producing long-term solutions." New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo is signing a new bill into law that will fundamentally change life behind bars, and Catholics are applauding it. The new bill will ban prisons and jails from holding people in solitary confinement for more than 15 consecutive days. It also stops the practice entirely for several minority groups such as minors and people with disabilities. The New York State Catholic Conference released a statement saying the extreme isolation only serves to exacerbate the root causes that lead to prison disciplinary issues to begin with, such as anger, antisocial behavior, or mental illness. This law reforms the system while still allowing correctional institutions to utilize alternative measures, as well as continued limited use of solitary confinement. There's a lot more news headed your way. It's a tradition that goes back to the very foundation of Christianity. We'll tell you why statues are veiled in the weeks leading up to Easter. Pope Francis is reflecting on the way of the cross a little differently this year. We'll tell you how. Plus, a staggering amount of college students are homeless. We'll talk to a Catholic official about what universities can do to help. Our coverage of Holy Week continues. It's a tradition with a long history that's evolved over the years, veiling statues as an outward reminder of the solemnity of the Lenten season. Curse News' Emily Druby has the story from St. Benedict Joseph Labre in Richmond Hill, Queens.
Have you ever walked into a church during Lent and seen this? No? Well, you're not alone. Do you know why these statues are veiled?
No, I really don't know why the statues are veiled.
The practice isn't a requirement, so not all churches do it, which is why it might not look familiar. They do at St. Benedict Joseph Labre and Holy Child Jesus Church, both in Queens.
The quote in Scripture is from John's Gospel, where it says Jesus went and hid himself from them. So we, in turn, hide or veil the statues as a way of kind of relating to that.
Father Christopher Henyu, the administrator for both churches, explains it all came to a halt in the 70s. But in 2001, a decision from the U.S. bishops to let each parish choose if they want to take part breathed new life into the tradition.
Since 2001, you've kind of seen a little bit more and more growing movement to veil the statues again.
The bright purple cloths are put up on the 5th Sunday of Lent in time for the last 2 weeks, which used to be called the Passiontide. Some places just remove the statues altogether. The practice is a way to heighten the focus on the Passion, the suffering during that time when Lent is intensified. And at this church, it's working.
It kind of reminds me to put my focus on Christ.
They remain up until the Easter Vigil when they're uncovered during the Gloria if possible.
And the Gloria is just a time of great excitement. You know, we're singing for the first time after 40 days, glory to God in the highest.
Father Henyu brought the practice back to these churches. He finds it prayerful.
We miss it when they're gone. In that emotion, I think we can unite ourselves even more to the journey of Lent.
A special way to remind parishioners all that Christ has done for them. In Richmond Hill, Queens, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Now to the Vatican, where in a scaled-down Chrism Mass, Pope Francis told priests to be humble like Jesus as they renew their vows. Every year, the Sacrament of Holy Orders is commemorated on Holy Thursday. In his homily, the Pope focused on the renewal of vows and warned priests of the poison of shying away from challenges. He said even Jesus disregarded his critics as he cared for sinners and outcasts.
Noi non ci scandalizziamo perché non si è scandalizzato Gesù dovendo guarire malati e liberare prigionieri in mezzo alle discussioni e alle controversie moralistiche, legalistiche, clericali che suscitava ogni volta che faceva il bene.
Pope Francis could not celebrate a Chrism Mass last year because of pandemic restrictions, but even with vaccination efforts underway at the Vatican, only 75 priests were able to attend this year's Mass. Every year, the Pope reads meditations made by others during the Way of the Cross commemoration. And this year, His Holiness will present reflections made by children. The Pontiff received these texts and drawings from children in Italian scout troops, group homes for disadvantaged young people, and the parish of the Holy Martyrs of Uganda. St. Peter's Square will be closed to the public for the ceremony, except for about 85 young adults who will represent those who contributed. From the coronavirus crisis to a financial one, hitting the pockets of college students especially hard. Students have already missed out on the traditional college experience with classes moving online. Now, a new survey finds the pandemic has had a huge impact on the highest risk students who are facing challenges just to make ends meet. The survey by the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice at Temple University found 1 in 3 students reported they lost jobs because of the pandemic. About 48% couldn't afford their rent or mortgage bills, with 13% experiencing homelessness. Students of color are more likely to experience these problems. The big question everyone is asking, when will it all ease up? Joining us now is the president of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, Father Dennis Holtschneider. So, Father, what are you seeing? Will things ever ease up for students in schools, or will they just get more complicated?
Oh, I think the pandemic is they're already planning now that we can head back to a little bit more of normality come next school year. So they're definitely going to finish out the year online. Many of the graduation ceremonies probably aren't going to happen in person or in very different ways. But by September, I think most of the Catholic universities are going to be to a way you'd recognize from the past.
So more in-person classes in September, hopefully?
Oh, largely, with options for those who aren't ready to do that yet.
All right, that's great news. We just mentioned a new study where college students say they're struggling financially because of the pandemic. From a moral perspective, do you think Catholic colleges should be more giving with financial assistance?
Well, truthfully, we've been leading that for centuries now, right? It's the Catholic colleges have a special heart for immigrant groups, and many of them were founded for immigrant groups. So lots of their annual budgets actually already go in those directions and get purposely targeted in those directions. So I think you're going to see schools scrambling to do as much as they can. Many of these students are now from families who could have contributed to their higher education, but now they've lost their jobs because of the pandemic and the economy. So schools are going to be scrambling to help their current students stay in school. That's going to be the first priority. And then they're going to continue, of course, to help new students as much as they always have.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because when schools had to take their classes online, many saw the enrollment go down. Are Catholic colleges retaining their students?
Yeah, our numbers pretty much match the national numbers, and so they've dropped, but they've dropped single percentages, so 4%, 5%, those areas. The drop wasn't as much as you thought. The big drops were in two areas: the incoming freshman class and international students. The Trump administration shut down all the interviews for international students to get into the country last year, so there are no international students in the freshman class this past year. And those were the two big ways that our schools lost enrollment.
Wow. So how can things potentially change under a Biden administration?
So we're going to see a number of things. They're going to be looking at trying to increase financial aid, which will be welcome. They're working on double Pell right now. They're going to be looking at questions of loan forgiveness. That's going to be expensive. I think what you're going to see is targeted loan forgiveness, like we saw this week when they announced loan help for those who are permanently disabled. This past week, when they kind of said, okay, students who were on privately held loans from the field program, they're going to defer loans. They've already done that through September. I think you're going to see targeted loan forgiveness. I think it's too expensive to do the whole. You're going to see them working towards free tuition at the public universities. That would affect the Catholic universities for sure, but that's enormously expensive, and no one knows how they're going to pay for that right now. So that's probably up in the air for a while.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to see, and hopefully everything works out for all those college students out there. Father Dennis Holtschneider, president of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, thanks for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. God bless.
Some U.S. colleges and universities are worried that they will again see a drop in freshman enrollment. This as the number of high school seniors who submitted their free application for federal student aid decreased by 9% compared to last year. In an analysis by the National College Attainment Network, the biggest drop in applications were in schools with the highest amount of low-income students. If you or your child would like to be considered for federal student aid for the 2021-22 school year, just head on over to fafsa.ed.gov and fill out a free application. Forms must be submitted by June 30th, 2022. Still to come on Currents News, we'll head back to Prospect Heights and the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph's to check in with Currents News' Emily Drewby about the upcoming Mass of the Lord's Supper, one of the most sacred liturgies of the year. We are just minutes away from the Diocese of Brooklyn's Holy Thursday Mass. Before we go, let's check back in with Emily Drewby. She's standing by at the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph. Emily, what's going on now?
Christine, we're starting to see parishioners arriving for Mass. Now, the Co-Cathedral can hold about 400 people with safety protocols still being observed, but we actually don't know how many people are going to be here tonight. It's a little different than the Chrism Mass on Tuesday, which is mostly priests. This is mostly parishioners. A lot of those priests are back at their own parishes celebrating Holy Thursday Mass. Now, again, we will not be seeing the washing of the feet here today, but a lot of the parishioners I spoke with said they're just so grateful to be here and grateful to be receiving communion. Again, that's something not a lot of them were able to do during the pandemic. So there's just so much hope and so much excitement in the air here today. I'll have a full recap for you guys tomorrow. Christine?
All right, Emily, thank you. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Stay right here. The Mass of the Lord's Supper is next. Hope to see you again next time.